Good morning. So I'm almost the last thing between you and lunch. Never a good place to be. Even worse is between you and the bar. So today I'm going to talk about a couple of things. Just as by way of background, Marathon operates really three distinct businesses. One is utility scale mining. That's what kind of the esteemed panel before me was talking about, operating large sites, either directly connected to a power source behind the meter or sitting on the grid and taking power. The other business we run is one called energy harvesting. You notice it doesn't say Bitcoin mining. Energy harvesting essentially is taking very stranded energy. It could be things like methane gas. It could be stranded hydro assets, solar assets, wind assets that don't have a grid connection, and even biomass, generating electricity, using that electricity to generate heat. Notice I didn't say Bitcoin mining. And take that heat and feed it back into an industrial process. This is the solution to the problem of where do I get my power from in the future? It's you generate it yourself, you become an energy company. The third part of our business is technology. We do everything from investing in the development of ASICs for Bitcoin mining, to immersion technologies, to firmware for miners, pool operating software, et cetera. And a lot of that technology now is also becoming applicable to the AI industry. So today I'm going to focus on energy harvesting and why I think that that is really the convergence where Bitcoin mining, the energy industry, and really the environment come to play together. So Bitcoin miners have traditionally been focused on these large utility scale sites, big buildings, big sites. Riot has built an amazing business with their sites in Rockdale and now their new site that they've just energized in Corsicana, Texas, talking in hundreds of megawatts or even gigawatts of power. As the panel before me mentioned, this is going to be harder and harder and harder to find because the AI industry has a mandate to go out and build these large data centers for AI. What the panel didn't mention was the fact that while it may cost upwards of $1 million a megawatt to build a Bitcoin mining site, it costs $12 to $20 million to build an AI data center. And I'll give you an example. Microsoft is building a data center that consumes a few hundred megawatts, $800 million for the building infrastructure, $3.2 billion for the compute power. Now, the equivalent Bitcoin mine would cost $100 million to build. So it's a very different business, very different economics. The hyperscalers are out there today cutting deals globally. G42 just announced a deal in Kenya where up to a gigawatt of geothermal energy will be used for AI processing. This is going on, and that's a partnership with Microsoft. This is going on a global basis. So Bitcoin miners are either going to be in the business of selling their sites to AI operators because of the power contracts, because the commonality of AI and Bitcoin mining ends at the power substation. Everything else of the infrastructure is different. And so we believe that the future of Bitcoin mining is in this convergence, away from these utility scale sites and more towards energy harvesting. So if you think about the energy transformation that's going on today, governments are forcing this transition to electrification. In the US, they're moving towards electric vehicles. The state of California has banned natural gas in new construction, so you can't use natural gas to heat your home, you can't use natural gas to cook, you can't use natural gas to heat water. It has to be electric. You have electric vehicles. That's a lot of electricity generation that's needed. There are some states in the US, for example, who have revised their power needs. Now, think about this. The electrical generation industry in the US over the past 20 years has seen demand grow by 2% annually. So they haven't had to build out a lot of infrastructure. They're now predicting 15 and 20% growth rates in the demand on power because of AI and electrification. And so states with regulated environments where before they opened their arms to Bitcoin miners and said, hey, please come in here, help balance our grids, are now saying, wait a second, there's too much demand. We don't even have enough for our consumers. And so this is causing a big shift. So the electrification is just exacerbating it. The problem also is lack of transmission. You can build all the solar farms, all the wind farms that you want, but if you can't get that electricity to the consumer, you can't get your site financed. You can't get that solar farm financed. And so somebody has to play a role of being this buyer of last resort of energy, which is what Bitcoin miners do, that can enable renewable energy sources to get financing, get built, so that in the 5 to 10 year period it's going to take to build out the $3 trillion of transmission capacity that the US today needs. And this is even before we start talking about Africa or we start talking about Europe. Somebody has to be that baseload customer. So that's one place where Bitcoin miners can play. But you also look at the issues of needing to find ways to offset energy use by fossil fuels and other means using things like Bitcoin mining, and that's what I want to share with you today. So there are many stranded or underutilized energy assets out there. Landfill gas. Lots of methane is coming out, or methane as they say here in the UK, is coming out of the ground in these sites. And Google is about to release a new tool with Google Earth, which will let you see where methane is coming out of the ground and where methane is escaping, which is something the fossil fuel companies are really not very happy about. So you have methane. You also have biogas. There are huge amounts of agricultural waste, byproducts of things like ethanol, methanol manufacturing, beer brewing, spirits distilling, dairy farming, etc., that today not only generate methane, but need to be mitigated and processed, all of which can be used to generate electricity. That is new additional additive energy to the energy being generated by solar and wind farms, as well as the grid. If that energy can be consumed at the site of industrial need, then now factories all of a sudden can be placed in places where they necessarily don't need grid connections. But more importantly, most factories also need something called heat. And I'll talk about that in a second. But so you have biogas, you have landfill gas, you have flare gas in oil fields. That is essentially just being burnt to convert the methane into carbon dioxide. That's wasted energy. And then you have other waste-to-energy assets, like methanol, ethanol production, et cetera. And then you have these solar and wind farms that don't have grid connections. Or maybe they're mature assets. Or maybe they're hydroelectric dams that have operated for years, they've been paid off, and now there are wind and solar farms in addition on those grids, and those hydroelectric dams can't sell energy. So what do you do with those assets? Well, you start to mine Bitcoin, but you have to do it at small scale. So stranded energy can be used to mine Bitcoin. We have the ability, using our immersion technology and our miners, to operate sites that essentially operate lights out at sub 1 megawatt capacity, all the way up to 1 gigawatt capacity. Now think about that. If you can operate sites where you have access to a few hundred kilowatts of power, and you can do it profitably, mining Bitcoin, you can use energy nobody else can use. You can also use energy that most probably you can acquire for 1 cent or less per kilowatt hour. But you have to have the technology to do that. Additionally, you can take waste energy, generate electricity from it, and then use that to operate your Bitcoin mine. And eventually, if transmission capabilities are brought near the site, you can just sell the energy to the grid. But meanwhile, you can mine using that energy. And as I think Adam mentioned in the prior panel, as newer and newer generations of machines come online, you take your newest machines, put them in your high-priced power sites, and then you deprecate your older machines to these sites. Well, if you have sites where your cost to generate electricity is zero, because you're being paid to take biomass, process it, you can put old machines and run them all day long. They only need to run 4 hours a day, maybe. So it's a very different business. So if we look at methane super emitters, obviously wetlands are a huge one, followed by agriculture. Energy industry is a big emitter. Then there's waste, trash, and other, as well as biomass burning. And when you think about Bitcoin miners, they are super efficient heaters. 95% of the energy that goes into them comes out as heat. One single S19, which think of this as what was state-of-the-art 3 years ago, can heat a home. It's pretty amazing when you think this thing draws most probably about 3 kilowatts. So we can take a micro data center, generate heat. Our immersion technology will capture water, essentially, at 50 degrees centigrade. It's a closed-loop process, so we don't actually consume water. It's just a closed loop. You can use that for shrimp farming. You can use that for heating buildings. You can use it for heating hothouses. And you can use it for preheating industrial processes. And why is preheating industrial processes important? Well, 50% of the world's total energy consumption is used for heating things. And of that, a certain percentage is used for what's called low-grade industrial heat, heating buildings, heating homes, the preheating materials that go into food processing, preheating materials that go into beer brewing, spirits distilling, ethanol manufacturing, etc., or drying wood. And if you look at that energy that's used for heating, 66% of it comes from fossil fuels. And it goes to things like boilers, electric heating, and biomass. So if you could take 10 to 15% of that energy and use Bitcoin miners to generate it, you do two things. One, you've mitigated your cost of energy, and B, you've eliminated a need for that energy to be sourced from the grid or other places. So we believe that supplementing traditional heating using the heat generated from Bitcoin mining makes all sorts of sense, not just financial sense, but it also makes ecologic sense and environmental sense. Instead of using electricity to drive heaters, heat pumps to generate heat, we can use electricity to mine Bitcoin, generate heat, and now you have a byproduct from your heat generation, and it's called Bitcoin. And it happens just to be a waste product from your process. So heat could be repurposed on an exponential scale, meaning as small as a little space heater on a table that consists of a couple of chips from prior used Bitcoin miners, all the way up to city-scale steam heating. We've just kicked off a pilot in Finland, for example, where we're heating buildings with Bitcoin miners. So you notice a lot of this is not about Bitcoin mining. It's about more environmentally friendly energy use, and it's about recycling heat. Bitcoin mining is simply how we generate the heat. So we believe that nearly all devices that consume or store energy are viable Bitcoin miners. Every single Tesla Powerwall, every EV out there, could do arbitrage with its excess energy and mine Bitcoin in small amounts. That is the long, fat tail of Bitcoin mining. Right now, we're sitting at that left side of the chart where it's all utility scale, but it's all going to move downstream because it's getting harder and harder to find those big power sources, those big amounts of available power. So we believe that there's an opportunity in the future where technology will include Bitcoin mining capability in any type of battery storage system, any type of large consumer heating system where it can do arbitrage on energy.